It's a beautiful Monday afternoon. We are here once again to take a look at issues emanating from this great continent of ours on the program Africa Discourse. My name is Wilson Omasho. Today, it's all about Libya. Yes, what about Libya, you may ask? It's like they're beginning to move out of the bush, or will I say get out of the bush, in the sense that for the very first time in a long while, a pretty long while, they conducted an election and it was successful. Right now they are planning for the presidential election. Doesn't mean that Libya is about getting stable. And mind you, they talked about zero funding for the election. Think about it. The one they tried to conduct, well, I say 4 or 5 years ago, made the country to have splinter groups, fight here, fight there. What do you think is really making Libya tick? Are they beginning to reason with times? Are they beginning to reason to know the importance of peace? Hence this topic, Libya municipal election. Yes, stability in focus. With me here in the studio to really throw more light on this discourse, I have a political analyst. We talk about local and international politics. He's well grounded. He's an activist, and of course, he operates part of an NGO, and we'll get to hear more about that in course of the discourse. Join me, welcome, God sent to Saigi Irmose. Welcome to the show.
Thank
I appreciate you coming.
Thank you, my pleasure. Good afternoon, viewers.
All right, it's like Libya is beginning to get it gradually. For the very first time after the disturbance, the great disturbance in Libya, they had an election free of rancor. Everybody went to that place, did their bit. No one is coupling for anything. Yeah. It was like a smooth sail. Come on. What do you think is happening in that country right now?
Anyway, for me, for the Libyans, we should begin to think outside the box. And I don't really, you notice after the post Mahmoud Gaddafi movement, yeah. Libya nation entered another rank of civil war. You know, and that election that took place, we must give credit to the fact that no life were lost, there was no violence, but that election took place in the midst of a second plague of the civil war, after the civil war of the Mahmoud Gaddafi era. You know, so we are seeing a country that I want to really say the international community has a lot to do in terms of the stability of the Libya government, because up to date there is still a lot of inner tussle and fight, you know. But it's a good thing that the election have come and gone just on Saturday, but let's not easily forget that that's just about 9 out of 69 province or municipal division in Libya. So we are still looking forward to other subsequent elections in Libya, in the different province of Libya. But what I want to say is that I think the Libyans, the average Libya citizens, are now beginning to clamor for peace. Because if you look at before the Gaddafi civil war and after Gaddafi was killed, there was another civil war that erupted, which currently Libya is still on. It is just recently that the international community have scheduled a peace conference again to see how they can unify the different rivalry groups, okay? But as an ordinary citizen, there is no citizen that wish for an unending war. You know, there is no citizen that wish for a blood-tasty environment. What we see over time is some politicians, or so to speak, some leaders in Africa hitting up the polity. Like after the Gaddafi era, the Gaddafi conflict, a lot of issues, you know, came up. You know, for a man to have led a country for over 40 years, you know, the international community should have known that a lot of groundwork would have been done. It was not just easy for you to overthrow Gaddafi or take Gaddafi out of the government and expect that sleeping dogs will lie low. No. That, and I thank God for Barack Obama. He acknowledged that in 2016. Yeah. He said perhaps his government made a very grave mistake for not preparing for a post-Gaddafi era. You know, and Barack Obama acknowledged that. And that is exactly what Libya is still on today. Libya is still in a civil war. Even the unity government that was formed was not accepted by some of the military factions. Because at the time in Libya, it was decided that all the different war groups should come together and be registered under the Ministry of Defense. Because it was also discovered that there was a lot of circulations of ammunition, all kind of group that have emanated out of the crisis, because quite a number of groups came out at the end of the day. You have the religious group, you have the military group, you even have the civilian group, those like the Salvation Party and all of that, So what we are beginning to see in Libya is the fact that the average citizen of Libya are tired of war. They are tired of a country that have known no peace in a long while. If you look at the history of Libya, you notice that the only time there was a relative peace was about the first 20, 30 years of Gaddafi. After then it was another crisis. Before Gaddafi took over power in 1969, it was from one foreign dominant to another before they gained independence in 1951. Then after Gaddafi took over power by orchestrating or driving out the monarchy president, King Idris, then, it was after a while there was a relative peace. But for about 20-25 years, the whole system has been heated again. And up to date, we are still at war in Libya. So it's a good thing that the election took place without death, no violence recorded. But I will say that the Libyan government and the Libyan citizens still have a long way to go, especially with the tension that is still currently on. And that is where the international community comes in. That's where the international community comes in.
With the tension still currently on, because out of 69, they had a kind of a peaceful election in 9 municipal. And people like saying that could just be the template for the election. Now, you tell me, what do you think is different? Because they tried it in 2014. It led to more trouble, more bloodshed, to the extent that members of parliament were attacked while having their sitting. What has changed?
Like I said, the average Libyan citizens are tired of blood.
Is it the Libyan citizens or the politicians or political party in that country?
All right, the reason why I don't want to give it to the leaders is because despite the fact that they had a peaceful election, the crisis is still on. Like you said, in 2014, there was an election, a democratic election that took place that gave birth to the Council of the Deputies, which was not accepted by the different warring factions. They came out to say no, they will not accept that. So we had faction led by the Tobra, there's this guy called Tobra, and some other faction groups that came out to say no. Then after a while, there was an attempt between Tobra group and one of the group to sign a peace accord. That was what brought about the Unity Party. All right, but some other factions, that is the military faction. There is a faction just in 2014, at the time, the unity government supported by the international community came on board and say, let's agree on a peace terms. Now one of the conditions or one of the things they said was every factional groups or war group that had weapons should register and become members of the Ministry of Defense. So they became legalized. This different group, the Taliban and all the Al-Qaeda and all the different groups that were warring and struggling for political dominance were now legalized into the military group of Libya. Now that caused more problem for the unity government. Because at the end of the day, these people now use their legality. Remember, the moment the unity government tried to bring them into the military of Libya by bringing them into the Ministry of Defense, they became a legal entity. They were paid by the government, but they continue their rebellious act. They still remain a rebellious group of people. And we're not talking about 1, 2, 3 groups here. We are talking about Libya case is one of the most complicated in the African continent currently, because all kinds of groups are taking advantage of the fight and the trouble. And the only time we can say that the leaders of these factions are really tired of the wars and the struggle is during the conference of this month. There's a conference scheduled for this April by the international community to see how to bring the different factions together. Until then, we cannot emphatically say that the different warring groups are tired and they are ready to drop down their hands. What we are seeing now, you need to realize that in every war, it is always trace to community instigation. It is the community people that are instigated to take up arms. Even during the Gaddafi war, it was said that tribal sentiment played in. Okay, it became a tribal faction. That's the reason why I said in Africa currently, Libya had the most complicated civil war. They are fight from every angles, while the religious are going on their own, the military are on their own, the civilians are on their own. They are fight from every faction. All right, that's hence the reason for this conference. It is at this conference we can tell whether the leaders of this group are really ready to lay their hands. But the average citizens, you see some of their comments, they are calling for help. They are tired of fighting and destruction. You can't live in a country and live in apprehension, a place that you call your home. And sad to say, apart from Libya, that is what some African countries have become over the years. You've become a place where you now have IDPs in your own country. You are now a refugee in your own country. It's sad, really. You know, we have that in Libya, we have that in Nigeria, we have that in other parts of the country where people become refugees in their own country. You know, the citizens are beginning to wake up and say no to this violence, no to this instigation, because it is the average ignorant community resident that these leaders mobilize to heat up the polity and bring about war. And it is these same persons that say, no, we need a peaceful election. We don't want violence. You know, that's the reason why I always like to say on Africa Discourse that the people are the power. It doesn't matter how powerful we think our leaders are. When the people become civilized, when the people become enlightened, they'll be able to checkmate their leaders. They'll be able to tell their leaders, you want me to carry gun? I won't, because I'm going to be killing an innocent person. You know, what we are seeing in Libya currently, for me, is kudos to the citizens. All right, then by the end of the conference of this month, we'll be able to tell, because different groups are going to come and bring out their attempts for peace and reconciliation. Then we will know whether the leaders are really ready to forge a new path for peace.
All right, now you keep giving it to the followers, the citizens, the communities. In these 6 or 9 municipals, they were able to conduct a free, fair, credible elections without interference. Does it mean that they don't have interest group in this region? Because it all boils down to leadership.
Yeah. You see, like I've always said, everything rises and falls on leadership. The African scenario is a leadership failure. That is my own take. All right? Now, let me quickly say this. There was a time the military in Nigeria had to start doing a lot of surveillance on the communities where there are a lot of Boko Haram insurgency, because they discovered that if the community do not form an allegiance with these insurgents, it will be difficult for them to know when the military are not on ground so that they can strike. You cannot talk about peace without involving the community, the ordinary citizens of that locality. And no election can ever be peaceful, even with the presence of security personnel, when the community residents are not ready for peace. See, one village can shatter the whole electoral peaceful process. A single community, especially when you have the youths there that are ready for violence. That's the reason why I'm saying that. If you look at several reports before now, there have been outcry. Even the average citizens of Libya have been calling on the international community to intervene. Look at what happened in 2012 when the U.S. ambassador to Libya was murdered, together with 3 other security agents were murdered. Look at what happened. There was a massive reaction, both by the citizens and the unity government. They had to move out and started doing all they could to force out this rebel group and make sure they seize different regions, especially the east, where they have colonized and gained dominance. You know, it's showing something that the citizens are tired. Our leaders have committed a lot of atrocity against the average citizen of Africa, beyond the shores of the Libyans. African as a continent, you know, we must begin to forge a new path. My call is for the citizens of Libya to continue to insist on peace and to continue to disengage themselves. Because if you don't give rebel group the needed assistance as a community resident, they can't thrive. Insurgency, disturbances, and political upheaval thrives on informations. When those informations are not available, their powers become crippled. When there are no allies that are ready to cooperate with them in each of these communities, their power and their force become crippled. You know, I want to give the peaceful conduct of that election to the tiredness of the citizens of Libya of war and bloodshed. There have been too many bloodshed in Libya, and for once they are coming up to say, no, we need peace. And this time we are going to force the leaders in Libya to realize that the blood of the helpless and the innocent citizens cannot just be spilled without apology. People deserve to live. The sacredness of life must be respected, irrespective of religious and ethnic affiliation. And I think that's what has begun to unfold in the Libya situation. And in Africa generally.
Well, like what you said, you're correct, talking about factional groups. Everybody wants to place their own demands on the table, and they want to, like, you know, extend that same impetus, that same force, that same passion in conducting election in other municipals in Libya. Do you see it working? Because it's just 9 out of 69. Because don't forget, some laying claims to the oil field and oil well in Libya. Will those warlords give that up on a platter?
If you
and you must conduct elections also in those areas, in those municipals.
That's the reason why I said 9 over 69.
Is that a pass mark?
It's still too early to give it a pass mark, but it's a good start. You know, every peaceful, democratic electoral process must be given kudos, because if you look at the state of the current Libya, you notice that it's a very volatile state. So for us to have 9 out of 69 conducting election in a peaceful atmosphere is, you know, we must give the current Unity Accord government some credence, all right? But mostly, I want to give it to the citizens. This is the voice of the citizens crying out. Because the reason why I'm always emphasizing this, Winston, is that the so-called political warlords or leaders don't feel the effect of war. Probably they are not even in the arena where the shooting are going place. They have their own safe house. They are not starving. The famine is not affecting them. They have their 3 square meals in a day. They have access to basic communities. So who suffers during the war? It is the children of the helpless, the ordinary citizens. I want to also say that we are going to, for me, on my prediction, we are going to see a situation where Libya must attain peace by all means, irrespective of any faction that likes it or not, because the people are beginning to say they are tired. Now, when I talk about the people, don't also forget I'm talking about the recruiters, those that have been recruited to fight this war, to instigate this war. They are beginning to come out and say, I'm tired. And I also want to give it to the Accord government, to the Unity Accord government. Between 2014 in date, they have been able to reclaim some territories. Even some of the very lucrative oil territories, they have been able to reclaim it back, you know, for the Libya government. Although there is still fierce and serious battle for some others, but they have claimed some ground. And even the opposition are beginning to realize that they are weakening. You know, I want to advocate that the best thing any warring faction can think about is peace. Not just because you don't have a point. Nobody is saying that the warring group does not have a point. But does your point deserve the blood of an ordinary citizen? And this is the problem with the whole continent of Africa. If you go down memory lane and look at the root cause of the Libya crisis, you can't take out ethnicity. You can't take out religious extremity. You can't take out the proliferation of weapons. Today, Africa has become one of the largest continents domiciled with all kind of weaponry, you know, in Africa today. And some of the Western nations that produce this weapon, they don't have as much of this weapon circulated among their citizens as we have in Africa. Some time ago in this nation, the military have to call that there should be submission of weapon in different parts of Nigeria, if you can recall. You know, because there is so much circulation of weapons in the whole of Africa. It was on news some months ago how some group of people were caught trucks with weapons in this country. You know, nobody knows how that news died down. You know, we need to begin to talk to ourselves. It's time for us to begin to let go war and faction. One would have expected that with the death of Muammar Gaddafi, you know, there would have been a relatively peace. But Gaddafi for 42 years, that's the reason why I said, I think the international community have learned their lessons, because Barack Obama said so. You know, they really did not prepare for post-Gaddafi. You know, for a man that had been on power for 42 years, you should be sure the structure he has built is not just going to fade out with ease. You know, you'll be sure that the people he has made is not just going to fade out with ease. You'll be sure that the weapons he has circulated are not just going to fade out, the ideologies. Because when Gaddafi came on board, he removed the monarchy. Libya was a kingdom. It was headed by a monarchy government.
Yeah.
He removed all the constitution and brought out his own constitutional ideology, his own philosophies into governance. You know, so what we are seeing is Gaddafi is dead, but his philosophies are still playing out. Different factions are coming in. So we have had a nation that have been built on greed, on personal agenda, and that is the call I want to call the African countries today. There's so much greed among our leaders. It is only in Africa, although we have some scenario like that in Western countries, but it's mostly in Africa you have a situation where a man get hold of power and doesn't want to let go. For 20, 25, 35 years, you know, you see these African leaders that have become so aged, they have become old, in quotes. You know, age is no longer on their side. Dementia have come in, but yet they still hold on to power. You know, this is one of the repercussions. Because when people stay in power for 30, 35 years, they have rooted themselves. They have planted groups and, you know, philosophies that even when you forcefully remove them, it will be difficult to remove their legacy or wipe it out within a twinkle of an eye. So there's going to be a time where that country will continue to experience some level of instability, you know, and that is where the international community have to be tactful. They have to be proactive in seeing beyond trying to remove a dictatorial government or an authoritarian government, trying to remove a dictator and seeing beyond what happened after then. Because what Libya is still facing today is the aftermath of the toppling of the Gaddafi government, you know, and I think it's a lesson for the whole Africa continent.
Wow, a big lesson for the whole of Africa, because Libya is like they're finally trying to get it. They are just this close. The big question now is, will they be able to conduct the election that has been proposed to take place this year, despite the factions, despite ethnicity, despite the warlords, despite the fracas, rancor that has engulfed the country, Libya. But 9/69. Anyway, we'll be right back to talk more on the impact or the influence of the international bodies. Are they directly or indirectly involved in what Libya experienced during the municipal election? Is it going to trickle down to the presidential election? All these and more we'll take a look at after this break. Do stay tuned. Thank you so much for staying tuned. If you just joined us, this is Africa Discourse. It's all about Libya municipal election, talking about impact on her stability. With me here in the studio is the Director of Africa Emancipation Movement, Godsent Irimose. Yes, a political analyst. I've been talking so much on this. Before we went on that break, we're going to take a look at the impact or the influence of international communities. Did you see their hands in this? For that municipal election to be that peaceful, even more peaceful than some climes in Africa?
Let me say that before, during, and after, I mean before the election, during the election and after, the international community have always been involved. All right? Even in the escalation of the crisis, some of the international nations, some of the nations of the world also contributed to the escalations. You know, currently, report has it that some world power nations are supporting different factions, you know, which is terrible. All right, that's the reason why I continue to call on African leaders to be wise. You know, to be wise. I love the speech given some few months ago by the Ghanaian president. You know, before the France president in a conference, and he said, "How long are we going to be like a teddy bear under the Western power? How long are we going to be tossed here and there? Of course, we need your aid, but we need our freedom, more importantly." Okay? Now, we cannot rule out the international community intervention in ensuring a peaceful election. But part of the things we are saying is that some of the escalated crises we've seen in Africa have also been, some of the countries of the world have also supported. You know, during the time of the Gaddafi civil war and even after, report has it that some powerful nations were behind some factions, you know, in terms of support and encouraging them. This is what we've seen over the years, all right? But we cannot rule it out that the place of the international community is sensitive and is viable. But rather than looking for where to sell our ammunitions and feast on the ignorance of the African leaders, I call on the international community to begin to think of a genuine desire for peace. All right? You can't give us weapons to destroy ourselves. Then the next moment, you want to find a way to bring peace. Haven't sold your weapons. You know, we must begin to reconcile these two differences. Just recently, a certain governor lamented the ammunition, you know, the level of ammunition that some people that have been troubling our country has under their possession. You know, and it was alarming. It was on news. It's terrible. Where did they get those weapons from? You know, we must give it to the international community in terms of trying to forge a path of peace. But we must say that the international community must also caution themselves. When I talk about nations, I'm talking about the world power nations. You know, they must be able to caution themselves. They must be able to talk to themselves. All right? You give us guns to kill ourselves. You give us weapons to kill ourselves. And the next thing you want to do is offer peace. Haven't done your business successfully. African leaders must arise. We must begin to realize that there is no dignity in greed. You know, because at the root of everything currently going on in Libya is greed. And another thing I want to say is that we didn't have to wait until the intervention of the international community. We can pilot our own affairs. We are not against the international community coming in and ensuring peace. No. But what we are saying is African leaders must now rise up and take responsibility. We must champion the path for our own peace without necessarily having to wait for the United Nations or the British government or France or Russia to come and forge a path of peace for us, or for our colonial masters, in quotes, to come forge a path of peace. We must begin to take responsibility. What we call crisis in Africa is not as complicated as it seems. That's the reason why I said that in Africa, there is a massive failure of leadership. That is what we do in Africa Emancipation Movement. We are passionate about rewriting the narrative in terms of the leadership ideology of the average African person. Because for an African person, it's a slave mentality. You know, it is a mentality of get it all and hold it. By all means, even at the expense of your life. Hold on to it, even at death. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks. Take advantage of any situation, any similar situation to crush your opponent or to hold on to power. That's exactly what we see in the African government today. Just imagine it has now entered the street. The day it rains cat and dog, the average bus driver increases his fare. It has entered the street. You know, it's a slavery mentality. Why is your fare now costlier than the normal? Because it just rained. You know, that is what we see. The day there is so much sun, there is increase in fare. You know, that is how we have grown over the years. And that's the reason why I keep on calling on the African leaders to take responsibility. We can forge our own path. We can create our own peace. We can pedal our own canoe without necessarily asking for the United Nations to come help us or the British government. You know, but we can't rule it out in the case of Libya, because sincerely the case has become so complicated, and we expect the international community to be more proactive, all right, especially in the conference that is scheduled to take place this month, to be more proactive, okay, to be straight to the point and to demand peace at all costs. Because my concern and my pain is for the average citizens, the voiceless, those that do not have enough money to take a flight, those that do not have enough money to buy their own safety and protection. All right? And all those that are instigating this crisis, they have this money, they have this wherewithal. No matter who dies, it doesn't get to them, doesn't get to their family, it doesn't get to their loved ones. So we must begin to civilize. And one of the things I say is that if our leaders refuse to do the needful, we, the citizens, can force them to do the needful without necessarily taking up arms. We can begin to educate ourselves and say, because ignorance, the level of tyranny in a nation drives with the ignorance of the people. There is a level of civilization that tyranny cannot drive. There is a kind of president that can never rule the America state or country. There's a kind of president that can never rule the British country. You know, you are either going to be the kind of person that will measure up with the civilization, or you'll be forced out of power. That is what we want to begin to see in the new Libya. We want to begin to see a situation where the international community are sincere in their intervention to create peace, not to come out in the public and claim they want to give us peace, and behind they give us weapons to kill ourselves. That's exactly my word for the international community.
Wow, international community. Before we dwell more on the international community, we just can't talk about the successful election without talking about the electoral umpire, the electoral commission. You saw some of them on their suits, that just doing one of the things to make sure that the election goes on smoothly. Now, there's this notion that the reason why they were able to conduct the election in this manner is because they were truly independent. How true is this assertion?
Anyway, for me, I think we have not heard of any protest since between Saturday and today. Probably, maybe the results are still, although they said they was going to start giving out the results from yesterday. Probably let's wait for the results to be out. We cannot point any accusing fingers yet because there are no protests. But one of the things I see with the electoral umpire is the sincerity to get it right. You know, one of the spokesman, Abu Salam or so, you know, said something around that. You know, the desire is to get it right. You know, we can't kill ourselves. We can't turn Africa into a den of poultries because of power tussle. We need to begin to think. Democracy still remains one of the best options, okay? We must begin to think outside the box. And I think the guys you have forming the electoral umpire are ready to get it right. You know, they have also said that the election is going to continue. You know, they will only have a break during the Jumad, the Muslim fasting period. Then after that, they will resume again. You know, it is a determination. And if you look at it, those are the ordinary citizens. Those are the people that are saying, are we going to continue like this all our life? Libya was viable. Libya had one of the best per capita income in Africa. Libya had one of the best economy in Africa. You know, today, what are we talking about? We are talking about a war-torn nation. So I'm sure the economy of Libya have already gone down in the period of this civil war. All right, there's a lot of things that have happened to the educational sector. Industrialization has been crumbled. There is no meaningful development that can take place in an environment of conflict, crisis, and rancor. And I think that's exactly what we're beginning to see. I will not say that there is biasness in the election as yet, because we don't have any petition, we don't have any convincing report about that yet. But what I see is the sincerity and the doggedness and the resolution on the part of those that constitute the electoral body to get it right this time. Libya must attain peace, knowing fully well that there is an international peace conference that is slated for this month. So everybody has to be on their toes. And the unity government, don't also forget, has the backing of the international community. All right, the National Accord government that was formed had the backing of the international community. The old dream we have now is how to get Libya working. You know, and what we should be talking about is appealing to these warring factions. There's no need for weapons. Gaddafi is gone. Forget about philosophical allegiance or tribal allegiance or religious allegiance. You know, we need to come down and forge a new path for the Libya nation. Especially for the sake of the over 6 million citizens that you have in that country. Wow,
fortunate new paths for the Libyan nation. That seems to be the watchword of everyone in Libya, and the proof to the word that they are set to really is by conducting a peaceful, credible election. But I say that command is just 9 out of 69. That's on the pass mark. They are just starting and all that. But still zooming in on the High National Election Commission, that's what it's called in Libya. You talked about one Abdul Salam saying that they want peace to really take place in course of the election. And of course, also, don't forget the coalition. They have their own party. They don't think they are going to sweep the polls because of this idea that they want to bring in peace to Libya. And that may lead to another dictatorship.
Anyway, I want to say
because
that
according to report, we're trying to garner other faction by conquering them, not to sit down on the table to talk, conquering those communities, conquering those factions, dismantling their stronghold.
Don't also forget that the current government, the unity government in Libya, is not just a single government. Some factions also come together to agree to that government. Like the Tubra, there's this one Tubra stuff. You know, they also came together to forge a path. About 2-3 different bodies came together to say, okay, let's find a way. You know, like I said, the Libya scenario is so complicated that there are all kinds of factions. There are religious extremists. Everybody's disturbing everywhere and claiming his own government, Republican government. You know, but you cannot take away political interest from politicians. All right, there's a tendency that each of this group, like I said, the unity government, there are 1 or 2 bodies that have already signed to that unity government, that accord government. There are 1 or 2 bodies that have signed to it. So it's not just a single party or a single government coming on board to form a unity government. The more so, the international community is also watching. Why we cannot rule away political interest? There is every political sentiment for a political party to want to get it all, you know. But I think this group, we also have to take caution because of the fact that the whole world is on Libya. You know, the United States is so particular about Libya. They have been involved in the case. In fact, that was where the ambassador was killed to Libya, was killed 2012. You know, so there is so much concern about peace, not just for the sake of some people that have selfish interests, but for the sake of the commoners, the ordinary citizens of Libya. So I think, despite the fact that we are going to see political interest, sentiment playing out in the forthcoming election, that is going to be well guided. I'm sure that they are going to be more careful, because except Libya is not ready to come out of their civil war, they are already in a civil war. So they are not expecting to join one. So except they want to continue to kill themselves and end the existence of that nation. But I think that the international community, there are a lot of meetings going on right now on the case of Libya. There are a lot of resolutions that have been reached. There are a lot of, case on the International Criminal Court against some of these factional leaders. You know, that was one of the cases that indicted Gaddafi. You know, there are a lot of all of this going on. So I think each of these factions are aware that they are being watched. Even the current unity government. So they have to get it right, because this current unity government was endorsed by the international community. So whatever they are doing, they are being watched, you know, in details, in total. So they are being watched.
All right. Now, this unity government being endorsed by the international community, do you think is another form of control? Mind you, that was what late Gaddafi fought against, and he was killed in the process. External interference. And now, the external body is almost like in charge. Not almost, it's in charge of all this. Come on, don't feel there's going to be manipulation here and there.
All right.
Would the Libyans still be for the Libyans or for the international community, talking about the West right now, to be precise?
All right. Let me say that in the academia, it is called new colonialism. Okay. All right. It is not only going to be a Libya problem. It is an African problem. All right. There have been interference in the Libya government. That was one of the things Gaddafi said he was fighting against. All right. Now, beside Libya, he's in Africa and the whole of African countries. There's a lot of neo-colonialism. There's a lot of interference. There's a lot of regulations going on. That's the reason why the West can tell you you're either going to approve gay or, you know, we withdraw some of your aid. You know, there's a lot of interference. You can't rule that out. All right. Definitely, every nation, the West are not stupid nations. You need to understand the psychology of the white man. For a white man to intervene in an issue, of course they will have their own agenda. Today, you know, some months ago or years ago, it amazed the world when we heard of the American oil reserves. You know, we're all shocked to know that, wow, America had such a mass, quantity of oil reserved that can serve them for about 200 years without buying oil from any of the African countries. That's how smart a white man is. All right? If they get involved, that's the reason why I've always said that the begging bowl is not a pathway to freedom. We must begin to understand that. Every nation play for its own interest. But for African to disconnect away from Western overbearing Western interference, we have to do the needful, because we give them room to take over our system or to influence our system. There is a lot of influence that, like I said, before the Gaddafi civil war, during the civil war and after the civil war, there have always been Western influence. There is still going to be, currently it is still Western influence that is trying to manage the peace. So there's still going to be Western influence. But the onus lies on the leadership of Africa. We must begin to go back to the drawing board and ask ourselves, how can we survive without being beggars? Africans today live on begging for foreign aid. Most times we are always shopping for foreign aid. We need support in health. We need support in education. We need international. So we are always asking. We are always asking. That's the reason why we have always said in African Emancipation Movement, the begging bowl is not the critical pathway to self-sustenance and to freedom. For every degree of help you are giving, you lost a certain degree of freedom. I need you to understand that. For some of these world powers to spend their resources to come to your nation, ensure peace, ensure regulation, of course, is a United Nations responsibility by the Charter. But you must realize that they must think of what is in for me. Because what we think we get for free, we lost a certain degree of freedom. I think it's about time we need to start thinking of overhauling the entire Africa system. We have to start thinking for ourselves. Africans today have some of the best natural resources in the world. Some of the most resourceful nations on earth, I mean naturally endowed nations, are in Africa. But till date, such nations still depend on foreign aid. Even like our own dear nation, Nigeria, we have a lot of foreign aid, but we can limit them. We can live without them. We can conduct our own credible election. If we take away greed and over desperation to hold on to power, you know, we can disconnect from the international community and don't give them room for unnecessary criticism. All right?
God sent.
So we have to take that responsibility.
God sent. A while ago, you were praising the international community for the way they played that they're playing in Libya, and now you're lashing them. What's going on? What's happening?
Look at the issue.
Because at first you're like, yes, they are. All of a sudden you turned. Why would you turn?
No, look at it, Winston.
Yeah.
I am not really lashing them, so to say. I am only trying to talk about the rule of business. Every businessman have an interest. I'm only trying to say that the international communities are in business. See, you need to understand how nations run. You need to understand why Africa is called the world's largest liability continent today. We are the world's largest liability. Africa is the #1 largest dumping site of the world. We are the greatest burden of the globe today, African continent. Now, all of this saddens my heart. All of this breaks our heart in African Emancipation Movement. You know, because we keep on getting the negative, awards in Africa. Not necessarily because, see, when you talk about civilization and globalization, it's a game of what do you bring to the table. All right? It is not a game of, I don't want us to see it as a game of marginalization. I don't want us to see it like the Western world are oppressing the African continent. No, I want to see it as a business. When you say now is globalization, what do you bring on the table? What do you have to present? Look at South Korea. Look at how they navigated their way out of being a third world country. Look at the Japanese. Look at the Indian, that was rated one of the poorest nations some years back. Look at the Indian country today. So that's the reason why I keep on saying that the idea is not to blame the Western nation, but it is to call on the leadership of the African continent to take critical responsibility. We have what it takes to sustain ourselves. We must, let me just say this to you. Do you know today, if foreign aid and intervention on our health sector is withdrawn, do you know the millions of Nigerians that will die? Do you know how much Bill Gates is supporting the health sector? Do you know how much help we are having in the HIV/AIDS intervention? Do you know the people that are paying for this cost? They are white men. They are not in this country. Then you want to tell me that they'll bring something on the table and you say no? They'll withdraw their help and their aid. Many lives will be lost. You will have to cry back and say, hey, we don't have enough money. We missed it.
But according to Gaddafi, that seems to be their aim, because when Gaddafi was there in Libya, things were like, smooth. According to Gaddafi, the economy is strongest in Africa until he was taken out of the picture for them to have a say in that country. Is that not what is happening right now in Libya?
Yes, we cannot, I can't take it away from the table that the Western nations are biased when it comes to Africa. There is a conspiracy to perpetually put us underneath and to continue to rule. We cannot rule that out. But what I keep on arguing is that we can free ourselves by forging the path of our own economic freedom. All right, we can free ourselves. Right, that was one of the claims of the late Gaddafi.
Yeah.
You know, that one of the way where they were able to, hinge on Gaddafi was the war crime. You know, they were able to come in there, and don't also forget that Gaddafi was betrayed not by the Western nation, but by his own people.
Through the Western nation.
But
Of course. According to Gaddafi, he was betrayed by the Western nation through his people.
The reprising, the uprising started within Gaddafi government. It started within the Libyan nation.
Fueled by who?
Why it was, but anyway, when you say fueled by the Western nation, it's still an allegation.
It's just a question. I just asked the question, fueled by who? Anyway, now, in all these talks, in everything that is being done in Libya, there's hardly anyone talking about the AU's impact in that country. What's your opinion on that?
It is where.
What did you say? This is African Union, for crying out loud. They were not mentioned in Libya's election or in the rebuilding of Libya as a country.
God. You know, the reason why I sigh is because I think in African discourse, one of these days, we need to bring Africa to the table and ask ourselves, what went wrong with the African continent? There's a lot to say about that. You know, today it breaks my heart to see that there is hardly any African system that can pass the test of globalization. There is hardly any African system. Even some of the food we eat, let me go local, cannot even pass global standard. If you take some, try to take them out of this country, they will call them unfit for human consumption. Every African system is over politicized and is seen as systems that are not credible. Now, somebody may say that is some Western powers being biased and trying to nickname us. But what do you do when you see the manifestations? Okay? Now, the AU is a body of its own for Africans. But, you know, there is, in the African scenario and in some other African situations, it seems like the AU does not have the credibility enough to intervene in African issues. Is
it credibility or the wherewithal to intervene?
What do you mean by the wherewithal? When, for example, let me come home. Probably, if you were to do an investigation into the AU issue, you may discover that part of their problem is lack of fund. Because the members nation of Africa are not even responsible to paying their contribution to making sure the AU work. If you do some investigation, you find out that that's one of the issues they are battling with. Probably they don't even have the resource. That is how selfish we are to ourselves.
Okay, our time is up. Our time is up.
Empires, not a nation.
Not a nation.
We build personal empires.
All right, well, viewers, thank you so much for being a part of this show. It's all about Libya. It's like they're getting it right, but not without the help of international community. And you just can't rule out the West. We talk about the international community, EU international community, but at least 9 out of 69 they are building on something. And God said has been trying to throw his own idea into what is really happening. Talked about the Libyan people, talked about the election commission, talked about the West, and of course the AU. Well, thank you so much for coming to today's show.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate your coming.
Thank you.
Let's see if the meeting they're going to have is going to give birth to a new Libya. It's all about Libya's stability. Bye for now.